In this chapter, we're going to start looking at really what this camera was designed to do for number one, but also delve a little bit into what it can do. A word we've used, James, is accessibility. Tell me what your interpretation of accessibility is.
Well, I think this camera is accessible to people on a number of levels. I mean, to start with price point, it's priced the same as if you go out and buy a 5D Mark III. So, I mean, and for what it does, I think that's extraordinary. And in buying this, you've got a camera which not only will allow you to shoot in a ProRes format or a DNx HD format to go straight into editing, but you've basically got 3 strands in which you can shoot with it. You can shoot using a video mode on this in ProRes or DNx, which will give you a look straight onto the back of the camera, similar to what you'd get if you're shooting with a 5D Mark II.
So it's similar to that of an 8-bit format.
It is.
What they call a Rec 709. It's a kind of TV look.
Completely.
Or not quite a TV look, but it's not using quite the full dynamic range and capability of the camera. But I guess if you're picking the camera up for the first time and you've never shot in RAW or in log, it's going to be a good starting point, isn't it?
It is. What you see is what you get with it, basically. You expose and you shoot, and what you get on the back of the screen is what you take into post-production, and that's what you edit with, and that's what you finish with.
And it's a great starting point. If someone is very, very... Because I think it's worth mentioning here, we've talked a bit about similarity to DSLR, but I think it's really important to bear in mind here, folks, that if you think you're just going to pick this camera up and use it like you do a DSLR, you're probably going to come unstuck, because there are some more complex issues.
Completely. Well, to further the sort of 3 strands to working with it, the second strand would be to shoot in a compressed format, ProRes or DNx HD, but to use the film mode on the camera. And that mode is giving you your 13 stops of dynamic range, because what it's doing, it's recording a flat log-like image onto the camera, which is therefore in color correction allowing you the most latitude to grade your footage. Out of the box, that footage and that image looks flat, and it looks, fairly distasteful, really, unless that's the sort of look that you're going for. Or it needs post-production.
And I think also what I've discovered in my testing is that you cannot take a log image in, let's say, Final Cut 10 and use the color correction tool in Final Cut 10 and necessarily get it where you need it to be. In my experience, if you shoot log image, you have to put it into Resolve or another grading platform, so you've got access to your curves and other tools to bring it up back to full richness.
I think ultimately that's the point. If you're shooting log, you need to be shooting with a grade in mind. That's the key to it. And then the third, and really sort of the most exciting feature of this camera at this price and at this size, is the fact that it will record a full raw 12-bit image. And that's really where I think this notion of accessibility comes in, because I mean, up till now there's been no chance of being able to shoot raw for what, £2,000, $3,000. It's just not been on the cards so far.
You mentioned something there. 8-bit cameras are what we've been used to, 10-bit, 12-bit. Let's just explain a bit as best we can about 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit. So my understanding, and I'm not a very technical person, and I don't think you have to be, but to understand what's happening with an 8-bit signal is that you've got your lowest shadow area where it hits black, and your highest highlight which hits peak white, at which detail can be resolved, and it sits within highlights and shadow, right? On an 8-bit format, you've got 256 steps.
Correct, yeah.
Per stop of exposure, is that correct? So you've got 256 steps in an 8-bit signal. In a 10-bit signal, I think it's 1,024 steps of gradation. And that's a much finer blend between colours and tone.
Completely.
That in itself is a huge step. You're getting 4 times more information from 8-bit to 10-bit. And it's confusing because it's just a number, 8 to 10. It's not just 2 bits, it's 4 times more information. When you go up to 12-bit, you're then going up 4 times again. And that, I think, is 4,096 steps of gradation. Correct. Per stop of exposure, which is massive. It's like adding so much information, and that's particularly relevant in color grading and post-production, isn't it?
Completely. I mean, these are all just numbers when we talk about them, theoretically in this context, but you really see the difference when you go out and you shoot footage with it. And you see the difference in things like the gradation on the sky, just the tonality of the image. And a lot of the point when we come back to talking about a cinematic look, a lot of it is down to the sensor size and having a larger sensor, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Much more comes from the dynamic range and the bit depth of the camera, because what you're doing with these extra amounts of color information that you're getting is you're getting an image which is closer to reality, closer to what you're actually seeing, and that's what's creating a cinematic look in the camera.
Let's just start at the front here. Let's talk just briefly about this sensor, because a lot of people were concerned initially that this was a small sensor. But it's not that small, and we've used it in anger, and really we haven't found many situations, if any situations, where it's been a problem. It is bigger than Super 16, not quite as big as Super 35mm, but the sensor is only one part of the equation, isn't it? So you've got a fantastic image sensor. I think is it a medical sensor? I'm not quite sure the origin of the sensor. BlackMagic pulled the sensor off the shelf. They did lots of research. So it's a very high resolution sensor, capable of, I think it's a 16-bit acquisition sensor, isn't it?
That's correct.
The front end.
Yeah, it actually acquires a 16-bit linear signal into the camera, which is then recorded as a 12-bit log file inside of Resolve, that is then interpolated again as a 16-bit linearized signal. As far as I understand, these are words of somebody more intelligent than myself. So basically, although we're talking a lot of times about a 12-bit raw file
being recorded,
the camera is working and acquiring the image in 16-bit, which is, you know, a huge step up from working with an 8-bit compressed H.264 format.
So what we're really saying is that you can acquire much more information in this end and acquire much more information without compressing it to death at the back end. So we're really just looking at the option of going either 4 times or 4 times again higher quality of acquisition of your original images. So when you bring that into your post-production process, you're just starting with a much better signal, aren't you?
Completely, yeah.
So that's the sensor, and we'll go into much more detail about all the other functions on the camera in the next chapter. Let's now talk about frame rates. What it will do, what it won't do.
Well, this was actually one of the first areas where I was underwhelmed, because I really wanted a camera which would be shooting at 50 or 60 frames a second, and it should be said right out of the box that this doesn't shoot at those higher frame rates. But what it does shoot at is 23.98, 24p, 25, 29.97 and 30p. So 30p is the fastest frame rate, as it were, that you'll get out of the camera. And who knows, this could change in the future. We're not saying, we're just speculating, but that brings us on to another very salient point about the camera. It is really very different from all other cameras on the market in the sense that it's a little box, it's a little computer, which is getting fairly regular firmware upgrades. And these upgrades we've already seen are adding a tremendous amount of functionality onto the camera already. I mean, just in the short space that we've been working with it, we've already seen upgrades to allow time-lapse recording, updates to allow aperture feedback on the actual back of the camera, and we have hopes there will be a lot more updates to come which could increase the functionality of the camera. And all of these updates I
think I had a conversation with someone at a trade show, and I just put the question to this person, and I won't name who it was because it wouldn't be fair. And I said, so in theory, if this is a computer, then almost anything is possible with firmware. And they said, in theory, almost anything is possible. So I think we have to keep an open mind that maybe there is a way to get a higher frame rate off this camera. We just don't know yet, but I'm feeling very optimistic that either this or another generation of this camera will have that capability, because that's what we demand as filmmakers. I think one of the reasons the Red has been so incredibly popular is its raw image quality, its ability to capture beautiful images, high dynamic range, but also the high frame rates. And so this is one of the limitations. You cannot go beyond 24, 25 and 30 frames per second. So, you know, it's not a high-speed camera, but it does so many other things so very well. Now, this is not without some artifacts. It's not entirely worry-free. There is a little bit of aliasing. We discovered it on this shot in Sweden when we were shooting a museum. James, you've had some issues with Mori. They're not massive. It's nowhere near the problems we had with DSLRs, is it?
Not at all. I mean, and to be fair, the Mori and the aliasing was the thing which basically stopped me from using DSLRs after a while. As much as I loved the size and the ergonomics of working with a small DSLR camera, I couldn't handle the fact, as soon as I started using cameras which acquired a better image, I couldn't handle the fact that I was essentially using a DSLR which was line skipping the 1080 image to progress to basically a very compressed format.
Because a stills camera like the 5D over here was subsampling the big raw image that the camera is taking stills from to acquire the 1080p image, whereas this is actually a dedicated video sensor. You cannot take stills on this camera, so it's dedicated video. The artifacts are certainly less. It's still a CMOS sensor, so there still is a bit of rolling shutter. But I personally, you know, I think I've got to keep coming back to the fact that it's a $3,000, £2,000 camera. You know, I'm happy to accept that, yes, if I start waving the camera around like this, then we're going to start seeing vertical lines bend and weave. But it's not really how I tend to shoot. And I think we've come to accept that that's a byproduct of that type of technology. The other thing I think that I just want to keep really emphasizing is just that accessibility factor of as a DP, the fact that this is so hedged around post-production, it's kind of given me a wonderful opportunity to embrace color grading. And you, from a post-production background, must find this a tremendously exciting tool, because it just saves so much time at the back end.
Well, completely. There's no coincidence that the camera ships with a copy of DaVinci Resolve. I mean, it's been designed by a company who make a lot of products for post-production. They've designed it with post-production in mind, and they've shipped it with not even a light copy, they've shipped it with the full copy of Resolve, because they know that when you shoot in RAW with the camera, as we'll go on to show in the workflow, what you want to be able to do is to take that footage through into an application, in this case DaVinci Resolve, and to be able to start with see your footage, because when you record in RAW, you're recording a series of frames, DNG frames, so the first thing you need to do is stitch them together to see them, and then to actually get the best out of this RAW recording format, to use Resolve to do a first light grade across your footage, to change the levels, to add some contrast, add saturation, create the look that you want from the footage, and then to send that off into your NLE, your editing package, to actually edit. So it's really designed to work with Resolve as a companion piece of software, and that again creates a huge accessibility for people who might have in the past only ever shot with their cameras and not even ever graded their own footage. This is really putting the onus on the user to start grading their own work.
So it will shoot ProRes, it will shoot DNX, so if you want to go straight into Final Cut Pro or straight into Avid, you've got that option. You've got the option to go ProRes film or ProRes video, DNX film, DNX video, so you can just take it out the box, run and gun with it, come back, edit and go. Then you've got the raw options. And of course with the raw options, which is recording the Cinema DNG file, which is an open source file format, that's basically capturing individual frames. And it must add here, when you first see your Cinema DNG files come in, don't be alarmed if the images look literally like someone's poured tea over the lens, because it can be quite disturbing when you first check a Cinema DNG file outside of something like Resolve. What's your understanding of why that is?
The point is that you're recording with the DNG file straight off the sensor. That's the point of RAW. You're recording all of the information that the sensor sees. That doesn't mean you're recording the nicest looking image to the eye, but you're recording the most amount of data. And that's the crucial thing, because that's what you want when we're talking about 13 stops of dynamic range, talking about recording as much data from the very darkest amount the camera can see to the very lightest amount that it can see, and everything in between. And then it's a responsibility of whoever's going to grade the footage, be it yourself or whoever is actually has the task of grading it, to then bring that image to life. And there's some tools to start with. There's some lookup tables inside of Resolve, and there's some quick cuts to kind of getting your footage looking nice. But the point is that you have all of this data to play with, and we'll really get to look at that in detail.
It's just to keep reinforcing that this is a different approach if you want to get this looking fantastic. But in the same way, if you go out and film with a Red or you go and film with an Arri Alexa, there's a lot of work that happens between acquisition and delivery. And from a director of photography point of view, what your job on set to do is to create great looking contrast and perhaps set a mood. But understanding what you can do in DaVinci Resolve, actually that's where your kind of job stops. There's things you can do. For example, you might be running late in the day on a shoot, and this doesn't need to be a drama, this could be just a corporate shoot, and you're running out of time, and you think, well, I need to bring some extra lighting into here to balance the scene. Well, if you know that you've got 2 or 3 stops of latitude shooting raw in DaVinci to raise the light level or lower the light level or create a power window and actually virtually light after the effect or after the fact in post, then you can make a decision about maybe not relighting and losing 20 minutes, half an hour to relight a scene. As long as you understand where you're placing your exposure and what format you're working in, you can actually effectively save time on location by knowing what's possible in post. And that to me is one of the most fundamentally important aspects of being a current modern day DP. Working in digital file formats, working in RAW, is understanding what you can do on location and what you can let go on location, knowing that the camera's acquiring it.
Completely. I mean, we were both very smitten with the Red workflow when we shot a commercial with 2 Scarletts, and we liked the simplicity that all you're concentrating on is getting the best exposure into the camera. And you're leaving things like color balance. You're obviously getting the ballpark right, but you have this control over color balance later on. You even have the control over how much you expose or underexpose the image later. But it's basically that simplicity of just concentrating on acquiring the best image and then having that control in post.
Well, James, I think that, other than talking about the media, which we'll come on to in the next chapter, I think we really need to get stuck into now is actually going through the physical camera itself, talking about the buttons, the inputs, the outputs, to help you really get up to speed quickly. So let's move on to that next.